Right, so there is a unfortunate version of events where Edna, the maid, could possibly come up in our exam, but that would not be the end of the world. She is actually a character there's an awful lot you could say about, and when you get under the skin of her, she's fascinating. So let's have a look at what we might say in the exam about her. So just like normal, I've colour coded my points I've made so you can see where it hits all elements of the mark scheme. Right, first of all, so Edna, if she came up in a question, it would probably be something along the lines of how does police present her as a character. I don't think the examiner would dress it up in too complicated a way because she's hard enough as it is. Now, essentially, in my introduction, I need to be establishing these key points. She represents the marginalisation and the subjugation of the women in the working class. Subjugation is a fancy word for how they're being put down, how she's being pushed to the side. However, Precy is also using her to bring in the inspector's message into the Birling's world. She is the vehicle that allows him to enter, and therefore his message is then brought into their existence because of her. So therefore she is a symbol of showing how they need to take responsibility, and how those responsibilities are not going to go even when the inspector leaves. So 4 points I would have to make, and these are a bit trickier because these aren't the usual big standard quotes you probably would have revised and learned, but these are the ones I would use. First of all, I'll be using Mr. Birling saying, "Giving us the port, Edna." That's right. So that shows she's considered a status symbol. She's just an object to them, and she just supports them with their comfortable life. I would then have this massive line here, "Please sir, an inspector's called." So that's the title of the play. You don't need me to tell you that's a huge line. She's introducing the inspector here, and she's introducing his message into their world. Now this is a very, very key moment here because Mr. Birling says, "Show him in here, give us some more light." So she introduces this brighter and harder light, this light that's a symbol of the interrogation, a symbol of their responsibilities. She brings that into their life, and I think that's her key moment. Finally, one of the last things we kind of hear or see of her is that when Mrs. Birling asks her to wait up to make some tea, she's not on the stage, she's not there, but we just know she's always in the distance waiting for them, just like the lower classes. They're pushed to the side, she's waiting for them, but not necessarily a part of their life in their opinion. So, first of all, giving us the port, Edna, that's right. So here we have just this proof that she is just an object to facilitate their lavish lifestyle. He's just assuming she's going to top up his glass of port and keep him drunk all night long. There's no interaction here, there's no conversation here, there's no "Hi Edna, how are you doing?" But it's just commands and assumptions all the time, showing the degradation of her, that she's just nothing to them. However, they depend on her tonight. They're trying to put a good image on for Gerald. They're trying to look like they're a well-to-do family that can do what they want. They need her to sustain their lifestyle and sustain their image, just like their treatment of Eva. They needed her to sustain their lifestyle as well. Now, she brings in the port. The port is a symbol of wealth. It's expensive, it's unnecessary, it's a luxury. So it's showing that the sort of quality of life they have. But it also shows the contrast between their existence and Eva's existence. Eva's drinking disinfectant, they're drinking port. So through Edna's actions, we also see this great contrast between the upper classes and the lower classes. This is a rhetorical question. Her compliance and her obedience is just expected. She's given us the port, Edna. Of course she's going to give them the port. She's not gonna not. So that shows the power of the upper classes, and it shows the inescapable plight of the lower classes. She has no choice. She's just got to keep doing her job to survive. But also, and it's deliberate, that we've got Edna sounding a lot like Eva. Their names are kind of mirroring each other, showing their plight and their limitations are very similar. They've got the same struggles, and this is reflected through the inspector's line. There are millions and millions of Eva Smiths. Here's one of them, serving them port right here, right now. Then she turns up and says, "Please sir, an inspector's called." So she introduces the inspector and his message into their world. And I think it's so beautiful that Precy's chosen a lower class young woman, someone who is at the bottom of society because of all these things that are working against her in 1912, and she gets the moment to introduce this message to the Birlings and bring about change into our society. I think that's a great thing that he's done. Now she says, "Please sir," and it's got 2 commas in here, so this is a very slow, disjointed bit. "Please sir." So maybe this shows her fear, maybe it shows her anxiety, maybe that shows the intimidation of the Birlings over her. But it also sounds a bit like begging to me, like she's begging, "Please sir," almost like a desperation for the inspector's voice to be heard, that she wants to see change in the world. Now we've also got this contrast that she has to refer to him as sir, whereas he is quite happy just to call her Edna. So that shows the expected respect when you're talking to someone above you in society, but the subjugation towards them when you're talking to someone lower in society. Now this is the title of the play, and giving Edna this title to say shows reflects this massive shift that Precy is showing is needed. The lower class person is the one who is saying that this change is going to happen. The inspector and his message is going to come into their life. So no longer are they being ignored and dismissed. No longer are they just being put to the side. They're now speaking up and making change happen. Now, it's quite key that she's expected to go and open the door, but when the inspector calls on the phone later on, she doesn't answer that. Now, that was going to show this idea of status. The phone is a status symbol in 1912, so Birling's going to take control of that, but the door is just the door, and it's tucked out of the way in the house. He can't be bothered to go and get that. So this distance is commonplace in 1912 upper class household. The maid, you'll go and deal with the door, you'll go and deal with the entrances, but the thing that symbolises my wealth and my power, I've got that, thank you. So then Mr. Birling, when the inspector comes in, he says, show him in here, give us some more light. Now this is massive, massive that she turns up the light. Up until this point, the light has been pink and intimate, so that would reflect their cosy, comfortable life and their rose-tinted view of life free from responsibility. But not anymore, not because of Edna. Now it goes brighter and harder, and as she introduces the inspector, she's therefore shining a light on the burning responsibilities. This bright and hard light reflects this light is being shone on their responsibilities. But it also takes on the feel of an interrogation. It's now uncomfortable for them to recognise the consequences of their actions and how these consequences are affecting exactly people like Edna. Now, the jury also, well, Mr. Birling uses this word us, give us some more light. So that foreshadows that it's all of the Birlings that are going to be exposed to their responsibilities, and all of them are going to need this guidance, because light is always a symbol of guidance given to them, and Edna provides that. And then sadly, when she's introduced the inspector and turned up the lights, she then goes again. So we can see how the lower classes are struggling. They're in this plight, and it's in this unbreakable cycle because they have no power, they have no authority to make their case heard. This is really her moment. This is where the inspector is going to come in and talk about all the issues and all the struggles and all the problems that people like her are facing. But she can't be there. She can't be there to make the case heard or say anything or be a part of it. So that's why the struggle of the lower classes just goes on and on and on. She can't change the world. It takes a ghoul-like figure, someone who doesn't seem to abide by the class system, to come in and make the voice as heard for the lower classes. And finally, we've got Mrs. Birling says, I asked her to wait up and make us some tea. So just like the lower classes, Edna reflects all the lower classes. They're there, they're in their life, but they're kept at a distance, and she has to stay awake and available throughout the entirety, but is just pushed to the side, just like Eva. So this is reflective of the Birling's attitudes towards all the lower classes. Now, it's really quite ironic, and I think quite sad, that these people that are treating people like her as animals, she has to mind them and look after them. She's making them the tea, she's meeting Gerald at the door, meeting Eric at the door. She's doing all the looking after and the management, showing the brutal hypocrisy of our society. They treat people like her like animals, but then expect her to put them back together again. Now, she doesn't introduce a second inspector at the end, because now it's time for the upper classes to face their responsibilities without her as a shield. They've not got Edna to introduce the inspector for them. They've got to deal with it and face it themselves. But finally, we've got this reference to tea, and I think that shows the complete ignorance of the upper classes. Just make us some tea. You can't solve this problem with tea, and any short-term pleasure that derives from tea will soon go, and they will have to face the reality on their own and deal with it. So those are the points that I would be making. I think there's actually a fairly decent essay to be made about Edna, and I think if she came up, it would not be the end of the world. So very best of luck, and I hope it all goes well for you.